Dr. Emerson-Lombardo is an adjunct research assistant professor of neurology at Boston University School of Medicine and Boston University Alzheimer's Disease Center, and received an Alzheimer's Association grant to study a combination of nutritional supplements. She is founder and president of the Brain Health and Wellness Center, which promotes evidence-based brain-healthy lifestyles. Using modern neuroscience techniques, Dr. Emerson-Lombardo integrated the result of hundreds of scientific studies into the Memory Preservation Nutrition, or MPN, program. Following the MPN program can promote cognitive and emotional brain health for people at every age. In her books and on her website, Dr. Emerson-Lombardo presents menus using her delicious brain-healthy recipes. Dr. Emerson-Lombardo delivers presentations nationally and internationally to lay and professional audiences. She also offers consultation and coaching to individuals and organizations, including guidance on customizing and implementing brain-healthy nutrition programs. Thank you so much. I do also want to let people know that we do have closed caption enabled. This is something you're going to need to do on your own end in your Zoom account. If you would like to do this, in the bottom of your screen, there is an option that says show captions. You click on show captions and they should show. If you are working on a laptop, it might be a little bit smaller screen, so you'll have to go to the option where it says more, and from there you will see the closed captions. Okay? All right, thank you so much. At this moment, I will let Dr. Emerson-Lombardo take it away.
Hi there, everybody. I'm so happy you're joining us this evening, this afternoon. And well, I hope you find this interesting. So I'm going to disappear for a while I share my screen, and you'll mostly see the talk. And I just have to get it started here from the beginning. There we go. And then I do a couple of things you don't see offline just to see that I can see the slides that I'm presenting to you. I'm really glad to be here. I'm really thrilled that Megan asked me to present for the Somerville-Cambridge Elder Services. They're one of our wonderful Council on Agings and Elder Services across the Commonwealth. It's funded in part by the state and in part by our federal government. And they sponsor many great talks. What I found is that sometimes I have to hit the buttons multiple times to get my slides to move. I don't know why, but eventually they will. There's always a surprise, right? There we go. Our goal is to create a healthy, robust, more resilient brain. We are beset by many things going on throughout our lifetime that assault our brain, and luckily it's pretty well protected, but it still can be hurt by environmental stresses, accidents, toxins of various kinds that manage to get through the blood-brain barrier, and even certain anesthesias. As we get older, it's really worth talking to your doctor about using ones that have the least impact on your brain. And then there's also invasion of microbes, which is undergoing more renewed research these days. The overall idea is that whatever's in the future on the pharmaceutical front, there's so much that we can do ourselves through nutrition, exercise, cognitive training, and other ways of keeping our mind active, and other healthy lifestyles like getting good sleep that help us enhance and strengthen the very elements of our brain, the neurons, the synapses, and the dendrites, and the other body and brain cells relevant to brain health. And these same activities help us boost our immune system defenses. Some of you are very aware of the Alzheimer's statistics, others not, but I will just mention a couple of things. It is still the sixth leading cause of death. We finally have some medications just recently that help slow it down, but there is no cure at this point, unfortunately. Over 6.5 million people are living with Alzheimer's today here in the US, and it's a worldwide disease. It's prevalent in the developing world as much as it is here. And the prevalence, many of you realize that the older we get, the more at risk we are, since the prevalence doubles every 5 years after age 65. It's very much an age-related disease. So the older we get, the more we want to work hard to protect our brain. The statistics over 85 are kind of scary. Over 40% of people at 85 and older have either Alzheimer's or another dementia. It's a huge economic cost in the country. And for years, our government really didn't put much money into research. But starting in 2016, we've been adding 300 to 400 million every year. And so now we're over the 4 billion mark, which is reassuring. The National Alzheimer's Association also puts a lot of money into research, especially helping get started with new ideas. The one thing in our favor is that it takes 2 or 3 decades to develop. So if you're already, even if you're already over 65, you can still be doing things to slow down the development should there be something pre-symptomatic going on inside your brain. Because that's one of our goals with the nutrition, is to interrupt this process and stop it in its tracks. This chart shows how long it can take to go from pre-symptomatic, where there's no symptom at all, to where you have some preclinical symptoms of mild cognitive impairment, maybe some memory issues, maybe some executive function problems. And this is called the period of early intervention. And then you have a full-blown clinical dementia when your symptoms are severe enough they're interfering with you leading an ordinary life. And people are starting to notice, even if you're not aware yourself. So there are many chronic conditions that influence one's risk for Alzheimer's and other dementia. Any kind of cardiovascular disease or symptom, it needs to be managed, because this puts you at greater risk of brain problems. We've learned recently that aggressive management of blood pressure to keep it below 120 to 130 rather than 140, which was the old mark, helps reduce the risk of even mild cognitive impairment by 20%. So that's a pretty important reason, if your doctor is suggesting to you your blood pressure is creeping up as you age, that you need to do something to take care of that and keep it down below 130, and ideally even in the 120 or lower range. If you have prediabetes or insulin resistance, that's the area before full-blown diabetes, as well as diabetes. Both these conditions increase your risk of having brain health issues. And there are other destructive processes going on in our body all the time that are especially detrimental to our brains. One is inflammation, and the other is oxidative stress, which itself can lead to increased inflammation. So you'll be hearing how we can use our diet to decrease all of these chronic conditions. I won't be going into anything other than nutrition today, but here is a slide that gives you a hint of all the other areas that we can work on to protect our brains. And the beauty of it is it brings more joy in your life, and it keeps the rest of your body healthy. And what's really, for me and others who were, let's say, the initial leaders in the field, thinking that lifestyle had to make it an important difference, now we have 45 different countries all working on multifaceted brain healthy lifestyle initiatives. Some of them are funded by their own countries' governments, and others, some get some funding from our National Institutes of Aging, and our own National Alzheimer's Association helps coordinate all of these trials. They communicate their data and their results and try to what's called harmonizing so that they can share information both for research design, but also sharing the results and coming up with ideas of what seems to really work. The future of Alzheimer prevention, early intervention, and treatment is going to be, I think, a combination of lifestyle interventions such as nutrition and the various pharmaceuticals that you're now hearing about. We still have no cure, but we now finally have pharmaceuticals that slow down the actual progression of Alzheimer's disease once it's started. It's a very complex illness with multiple pathologies and develops, as I mentioned, many years before symptoms and before a full-blown dementia appears. That's why it's so hard to reverse the whole process. Earlier in the stages of development called mild cognitive impairment, it may be possible to reverse the damage. So stay tuned for what of all the lifestyles would be the most important, as well as which of the pharmaceutical interventions. Now we have 2 approved by the FDA, but there are a whole new different approaches being studied, such as focusing on the metabolic person's metabolics that are promising. And then I think the future is going to be a personalized medicine approach where each of us are analyzed what our biggest risk factors are and what we're already doing and what areas we might need to make changes to improve our progress. Now, why brain foods? I and other researchers think there's evidence at this point that by ourselves, foods could delay the onset of Alzheimer's by itself. If it did that, it would cut the prevalence in half. It may be that physical exercise is even more powerful than healthy nutrition, but both of them are really key. And in the meantime, they, besides helping reduce the prevalence of Alzheimer's and slowing it down, it slows down mild cognitive impairment. That's a stage before Alzheimer's, which may or may not go on to full-blown Alzheimer's. Also helps prevent stroke and perhaps other dementias. There's less research on food with some of the other dementias. And in the meantime, it'll improve our overall health, quality of life, and longevity for everyone. The same foods that are great for the brain are great for the body. This food pyramid that I like to use, by the way, is African Heritage Diet. You'll be hearing about some other recommended nutrition programs, but basically, whatever your ethnic background, if you looked at what your ancestors ate a century ago, 2 centuries ago, that's way healthier than what we're eating now. So think of the favorite recipes from your family's earlier days. And if you have any dessert recipes, you'll find that we have doubled the amount of sugar in our typical dessert recipes. And that's part of the problem, too much sugar. You'll be hearing more about that in a minute. I will go back to this. I want you to see one reason I like the African diet as shown here. I know there's so many countries in Africa. I don't know which countries this was based on. Harvard helped develop this with some nutritionists from Africa. You see that the base is leafy greens. You will be hearing a lot. That is one of the healthiest vegetables that we have. And then you've got another layer of all these other healthy vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans and peas. And then the other thing I really liked about this is the emphasis on herbs, spices, and traditional sauces. You'll hear in my own program, I think herbs and spices are a real big bonus for us because they're so intensely not only flavorful, but full of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory agents. And then fish and seafoods, very important, very healthy. Less, as you go up the pyramid, then you want less of these other foods. Some of them are okay to eat, like other poultry and eggs and healthy oils, but you don't want to overdo it. And the same with dairy. And then all of the different heritage programs say really make sweets the smallest part of your diet, not your major go-to. I won't go into detail here, but whether it's my program or others, they're based on hundreds and hundreds of studies. People started looking at what's called lab studies, looking at what if you feed a mouse a particular food thought to be healthy, can we see that it directly improves their cognitive function, which we have. And then you look at how do humans that you follow over time and you see what they eat, and then you see how that might affect their likelihood of getting cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's. But you can't really know for sure if certain foods are helping unless you do a clinical trial in people. The lab studies were essentially clinical trials and little trials. I can't say clinical. Clinical refers to humans, but trials in animals. And so, of course, it's very expensive to do the clinical trials, but we do now have enough to be able to hang our hat and say what we eat really makes a difference to brain health. So one thing I like to keep in mind for people is that even if somebody already has Alzheimer's, they have more healthy brain cells left than they have unhealthy ones, and they're creating new ones all the time, especially the more you exercise, the more you create new brain cells. So proper nutrition, exercise, and other healthy lifestyles can help somebody who already has Alzheimer's maintain their healthy brain cells and slow down progression. It may not be enough to totally defeat it, but it's certainly important to slow it down. And in the meantime, if everybody in the family eats healthier and exercises more, the whole family helps maintain their health, which is very important. And the same foods that help our cognition help improve mood, which is really also important. One thing we learned early on was that a combination of foods is more potent than single foods. It's really hard to find any single food that is robust enough to make a difference. There is one that makes a negative difference, red meat, but in terms of the healthy foods, you need the combination. And besides the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, once this group of researchers, actually was a Greek fellow, Nicholas Garmeas, from who was at Columbia at the time, who developed an idea of using a point system to judge more easily what the variety of foods that a person ate. They had many people and they were looking at what they ate to see how it related, to come up with a quick summary, a number that they could then compare to their risk of getting Alzheimer's. And once he did that, it's an innovation, then everybody else could take their diet and apply a similar point system and copy his methods and come up with saying, oh yeah, well, ours also help lower the risk of dementia. It was a great innovation. And then in that same group with Nick Skarmeas, but also with his colleagues at Columbia, they did look at whether it extended the life of persons who already had Alzheimer's in their study. And it did by 4 years if they closely adhered to it. But they didn't have enough people in their study to see if it also slowed down their rate of progression. And even though it's been many years since that study, they didn't repeat it with additional measures. That happens sometimes, but it was very promising. Then our first clinical trials were kind of weak. Again, it was taking more the medicine approach and looking at single things like B vitamins or fish oil. They were mixed results when you're using only single nutrients. The pilot clinical trials with herbs and spices actually were very promising for people with early Alzheimer's in terms of a single but a spice isn't a single nutrient. That's the point. But as you'll hear, there wasn't, it's partly a matter of money, but nobody's done a huge trial to actually confirm or prove these particular spices alone would do this for people in general. Other studies showed that high glycemic index foods are bad for the brain and memory, not just for aggravating your diabetes. And then the first Whole Foods dietary trial was reported about 10 years ago. And then we had the Finnish multi-domain randomized clinical trial showing positive results. And it included not the Mediterranean diet, because it took place in Finland, but the Finnish national diet, also called the Nordic diet. And then, as I mentioned, there were pilot clinical trials with spices and herbs. Again, these were 10 years ago or more. The ones that they looked at, and these are small studies. The initial ones were done in Iran with just 40 people. He first looked at sage and then Melissa, which is lemon balm, which goes wild in my yard. Got my attention. Excuse my coffee, and I'll take a glass of water now and then. And then the one that really caught my attention was saffron. He used 30 milligrams of saffron, and instead of using a placebo, he used the then most popular, still used a lot, Ariset. Doesn't slow progression, but it helps with memory. And what he showed is that his saffron tied with Ariset in terms of improving cognition, but it, unlike Ariset, had no side effects. All the early medicines, some people tolerate them very well and can take them for years. Others have a lot of GI side effects. And then another trial was done by others, and so showed that saffron tied with another medicine, memantine. And this one had a few more people and lasted a whole year. That was done by a colleague of mine, Dr. Zolaki in Greece. She's a neurologist that helped found their Alzheimer's Association. She's very active in both organizational work as well as great research. And then she also did a trial showing that saffron slowed cognitive decline in people with MCI versus a wait list. So again, let's see people doing it with a few thousand people, and then more people might be looking at spices. And by the way, because drugs are so expensive, even though we think of saffron as an expensive herb or spice, it actually costs less than Ariset at the time I looked up the figures, which was about 10 years ago. One spice that's newer, I recently did some talks focusing on herbs and spices, and I was delighted to find a new promising herb that's familiar to all of us, spearmint. The extract used was produced by a food company in the US that refines spearmint, dried spearmint leaves, and creates an extract that's used in the food industry. So it's already guaranteed as safe. And they found that using 900 milligrams is kind of a large dose, but it improved working memory and spatial working memory accuracy. These weren't people with Alzheimer's disease, however. I hope that they're planning, but they did have MCI, mild cognitive impairment. Sorry, didn't expect to have any coughing issues. I have cough drops here. So I'm hoping they'll get funds to do a larger trial, because this is very promising. And it's with a substance that can be calibrated, and you know exactly how much you're using and giving to people, and it's safe. Also help people in their ability to fall asleep, which is also kind of important for seniors and for brain health. Then some of the other spices, again, they're all been used in small amounts and nobody followed it up to do the big trial. In the US, a 1-year open label trial, open label means everybody knew who was getting it and there was no placebo. So you don't take it so seriously. But an aloe vera product improved cognition in people with Alzheimer's and lowered inflammation. I would really love to see that one researched more thoroughly. And then turmeric is of great interest to people because it's such a great anti-inflammatory agent. And there have been some suggested positive results, but it's so hard to use because it has to be dissolved in fat to be effective. So it's much harder to get the right dose and to use it as in a clinical trial. So just sprinkle it on your eggs in the morning and everything that lots of things you cook. It doesn't have much flavor. It's got very colorful and it's very healthy for you. So to repeat myself, they were all small pilot clinical trials. They need to be repeated not only with larger numbers, but with biomarkers to see if they are actually slowing the alpha, A beta or tau pathologies prominent in Alzheimer's disease, or doing some other powerful things biologically that would explain to us how they're having the effect that they're having. And then meanwhile, again, lots of lab trials with mice. There's so many, any herb or spice you look at will probably be shown to have positive effects. And depending on what you're looking for, you'll see whether they help with your sugar regulation, elevate your mood, calm anxiety, help with sleep, help with memory, or ease pain. And during the Q&A, I mean, I just think this is one of the easiest ways that all of us can improve our lifestyle. More spices. Okay, here's another study that's not so much fun to learn about. Another excellent researcher, Suzanne Kraft, is really focused on sugar metabolism and how that affects our brain. And she's also experimenting with using drugs used to treat diabetes to see if they help people who already have Alzheimer's disease with some interesting effects. What she did here wasn't with a huge number of people, but it had statistically significant effects. She showed that people eating a low glycemic index, a low saturated fat diet, improved their cognitive health. This is people with she worked with both normal older adults and people with amnestic mild cognitive impairment. That means you have a cognitive impairment that's specifically memory related. And she showed those with a high glycemic index and high saturated fat diet fared much worse than those on the low glycemic index, low saturated fat diet. This was in, I think it was just 50 people. And yet she was able to show statistically significant results. She was able to look at the level of A beta in the CNS fluid and also measured an improvement in a very specific visual memory. Healthy fats are okay. Even a little saturated fat, she was able to show it's the sugar and trans fats and having way too many saturated fats that we need to avoid. And then the first gold standard randomized clinical trial to prove that a healthier diet improves thinking and memory occurred just 10 years ago in Spain. And the success of their trial shows that if you give people free food, they eat it. And since they did this, more and more clinical trials have been using this because it's really hard to get people to change their diet. But if you give them some incentives, like giving them free, at least some free food that you want them to eat. In this case, they gave one group free extra virgin olive oil and another group free nuts. Now, to achieve the results they did, they saw that people also were eating more fish and more legumes or beans as recommended by a Mediterranean diet. Those are the significant changes. And what they showed is that it was part of a larger study which showed dramatically that a Mediterranean type diet will reduce first-time heart attacks and strokes, which all of us need to worry about as well. And they showed a 30% reduction, which is really something. That was in their full 7,500 people. And their smaller group where they looked at the impact on the brain, they were able to show that those that ate more olive oil improved their executive function. Those who were given free nuts and therefore ate more of them, it was their memory that improved. So I conclude is eat more olive oil and more nuts. And then another group did, and she was a young at the time. She was doing her postdoc, and what she was able to show is that what we eat can slow some Alzheimer's pathology. This is looking at biomarkers. She was looking at the amount of A beta in the brain. We can now do this with certain PET scans. And what she did, working, she got this Nick Skarmaeus to join her study. He's the one that came up with a way of coming up with a numerical system for rating how closely you followed a Mediterranean diet, even though you were not from the Mediterranean. Here, these people are in Australia. She was able to show that people who most closely followed the Mediterranean diet had the lowest levels of brain beta amyloid, both at the beginning, and then she looked at them each year for 3 years before she published. Not only did they have less at the beginning, but their buildup over the 3 years was less in the others who didn't follow it so closely. Then she looked at each element of the brain of the Mediterranean diet for which they had a point, and the only one that showed up statistically significant was red meat. And if you eat lower amounts of red meat, you have lower amounts of A beta. In other words, red meat's been identified as a particular problem for brain health. It's not just the saturated fats in them. There's something about red meat, whether it's pork, beef, lamb. We really need to eat less of it. That doesn't mean cut it out altogether, but don't eat it every day. Don't eat it multiple times a week. And so when you do have it, pick your favorite and really enjoy it, because it's really not good for you. And it may be that it interrupts good gut health. We don't really know the reasons, but a neurologist friend of mine doing research in Alzheimer mice determined it when you eat red meat, at least these mice, it increased the amount of a very negative gut bacteria that led to more A beta in the brain. And we now know that our gut really affects the health of our whole body, well, also our brain. The MIND diet, some of you may have heard of, and was developed by one of our best Alzheimer researchers in the nutrition world, Martha Morris, from Chicago, Northwestern University. And it's rated very highly. It's an acronym. She was really brilliant. She did so much research looking at one different food after another. She's one of the ones that said green leafy vegetables are so important for our brain health. And berries, a half a cup a day, are particular stars. And the MIND diet is acronym for Mediterranean Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. Other elements, nuts and beans, whole grains, olive oil, all of these are great foods and are included in my program as well. Chicken and fish for non-vegan protein sources, red wine in moderation. Though there's more and more research, unfortunately, because I love my red wine, that any kind of alcohol may not be good for us. And then you limit consumption of red meat, butter, margarine, and all processed foods, especially desserts. And by processed foods, we're not talking about, it's really ultra processed foods, because they just do lots of things that we're still learning how they wreck our gut and other parts of our health. But desserts are especially dangerous because they're often loaded not only with sugar, but saturated fats. They used to be loaded with trans fats and other things that just, when you eat them in excess, are not good for our body or our brain. Now, she started a clinical trial. It was the first one funded in the US in 2016, and it would be finished by now. But unfortunately, she died in 2020 of cancer. And I was hoping her colleague, who's at Harvard, would complete the trial, but also the pandemic came in between. So I don't know. I haven't tried to reach out to her research team to see whether it's just been delayed or whether it got dropped. But meanwhile, her diet is part of the US Pointer study, which is, I mentioned, there's this 45 countries doing these multifaceted healthy lifestyle trials. They all have nutrition, physical exercise, keeping your mind active, keeping socially engaged. And so our US Pointer, which is actually funded by the National Alzheimer's Association, again, it's our NIH was not used to funding clinical trials of healthy lifestyle. So our National Association had to take the chance that they could raise enough money to mount a clinical trial. And they have relied on our chapters, and I guess it's 5 different parts of the country, and community organizations like YWCAs to sponsor exercise programs. And then, and then they've gotten NIH funding to supplement the initial donor-funded study. But we needed our own study. We couldn't be the only country without one. And then the Mind Diet is part of that. So that is where Martha Claire Morris's work is really shining. Meanwhile, there's the Nordic diet. I don't want you to go away thinking, oh, I got to eat Mediterranean or Mind or Nordic. There's so many different ways, and you could look at all of them and find which appeals to you. For instance, Martha Claire Morris emphasizes berries, and I think she's right on with that. There's so many studies that show how powerful, full of nutrition with minimal sugar, and all that color in berries is telling you it's full of healthy antioxidants. But the Nordic diet emphasizes tree fruits like pears, apples, and peaches. So some emphasize root vegetables and others less, like the Nordic diet. So in general, you'll see all of these emphasize eating lots of fruits and vegetables, avoiding red meat, avoiding ultra-processed foods and sugar. And there's just so much variety of good, healthy diets out there. You can kind of pick and choose what suits you best. They all agree. Avoid the processed foods, the excess bad fats, and sweets. Eat lots of fruits and vegetables. And fish. They all love fish. And I like quoting this fellow. I met him at one of our conferences, and luckily he's many years younger than me and doing great work. His name is Richard Isaacson. And he said, if you want to take a fast train to Alzheimer's disease, just eat lots of sugar. So keep that in mind when you're reaching for a cookie. The best way is to avoid bringing sweets into your home, and whatever kind it is. And honey is just as, unfortunately, deadly as refined white sugar. So it may have other health benefits, but you need to limit it. And I'll get into what that limit could be. And this guy also had been experimenting with fasting. He sees lots of patients. So he recommends fasting instead of coconut oil to obtain ketosis, and he has reasons for that. but lots of people are looking at fasting if you already have Alzheimer's as a way, another way to try to slow things down. Well, when you do eat healthy foods, of course. Then I wanted to show this briefly. There's now studies coming out showing, focusing not on cognitive health, but emotional health. And what I found striking was both of these use the Mediterranean style diet, is that they could see positive emotional health results in just 3 months or 6 months. And one of them gave out free food cooking lessons again. And another one found that when they improved their diet, they also saved $104 a month when they stopped buying junk food. So keep that in mind. To see cognitive results takes longer, but in 3 or 6 months, you can improve, relieve your levels of anxiety and depression. That seems really relevant for us all to know. And then there's all sorts of future brain foods research on the horizon. I just mentioned a few here. As I mentioned, I'd really like to see big trials with spices, herbs, and hot peppers. And when I did my other presentation, I realized, oh my goodness, it was this huge, well-funded ginkgo biloba study done years ago. And they set this is before we had biological measures, and they used as their outcome measure, did it slow down the number of people getting dementia? And that's a really hard target for a 2-year study. And they got a really big NIH grant, and they didn't use any other outcome measures. So it failed. And once that failed, then you just try to get big money for another study of any herb. There may not have been good reason to pick ginkgo biloba other than its reputation to help memory, but I just hope people funding research take another look at herbs and spices, as well as some of the other aspects of healthy diets. Okay, I've really told you the most important information. I've got another about 15, 20 minutes. I'm just kind of go over some of the elements of the memory preservation nutrition program. Again, it's not better or worse than any of these others. I think the main thing I add is the herbs and spices, and maybe lots of good recipes. So in general, this is all based on the research I just summarized. What we're trying to do with our diet is increase the amount and variety of antioxidants, because again, oxidative stress and inflammation really drives Alzheimer's disease and many of the other ailments that plague us in older life. We want to reduce insulin resistance. That is, we want to improve our sugar metabolism. We want to reduce our LDL cholesterol, avoid trans fats, which are now outlawed, but they still appear in foods when they're under 0.5 gram per serving. And we want to reduce our sugar intake. Those are very straightforward. Then we also want to increase our omega-3s and healthy fats, because the fats that we eat is really, really important. And one of our strategies, as I mentioned, is reducing inflammation. Many of the ones I just mentioned help do that. And then we want to ensure adequate amounts of certain vitamins. And we want to eat probiotics and prebiotics. This is because of all the new research on gut health. I added that. Wow, that's now several years ago, 7 years ago. So in general, principles are, and you've been hearing this as I reviewed other studies, whole foods are the best for us. Use fewer processed and only healthy foods. More plant foods, fewer animal foods. Fish and seafood a minimum of 3 times a week. At the end, I have a chart that you can, you'll have with the PDF that summarizes some of these principles. Reduce all forms of sugar and refined carbs. Refined carbs means like white rice, white processed wheat, things like that. You want the whole grain. Go for all the whole grain breads. There's a lot of variety now. And you want brown rice, red rice, black rice, not white rice. And then you're reducing desserts. And that doesn't mean have none, just have less and smaller pieces. Avoid trans fats and high fructose corn syrup. Read your food labels. So anyway, there in spices, leafy greens, nuts, seeds, I'm listing some of the most important ones. And I want to mention beans, legumes, and lentils several times a week. We tend to forget about them. Some ethnic diets, that's a mainstay, but many Americans hardly eat any beans or legumes or lentils. Eating nuts instead, that can help. But it's nice to have these as part of your weekly diet. And then in general, a greater variety of foods in moderation might be helpful. And then how do we maintain a healthy gut? I'll talk about this maybe a little bit more. Pickles can help, probiotics, and what are prebiotics? And in general, it's good to consume 3 meals with 1 or 2 snacks. Some people do best with fewer meals. And then it's very important to be hydrated, mainly with water. Tea and herbal teas can help. If you use fruit juice, keep it to a minimum, like a 1/4 cup a day. It's otherwise too much sugar without the fiber that would slow down its absorption. Okay, so again, I'm going to go through each of these quickly, trying to watch the time. We're trying to increase the amount of variety of antioxidants. With these slides, I'm just kind of highlighting some foods that might not have occurred to you. So if you see some foods highlighted that, oh, I really like them, but I just don't tend to buy them or eat them, but maybe I will. That's what the purpose of these slides are. And what was reassuring was in the lab, any time of antioxidant-rich food that was tested in our Alzheimer mice led to better thinking and reduced beta amyloid in the brain. These are mice genetically modified to have Alzheimer's. They wouldn't normally get it. Oxidative stress plays a major role in brain cell deterioration, leads to the development of this A-beta pathology, which in turn or independently, it affects the tau development of tau. What happens is you want to prevent the oxidation of your DNA and the delicate omega-3s that are vital to brain health. Our brain cells are actually made of omega-3s and they're easily oxidized. So that's another whole logic of why you want to eat lots of antioxidants. And then the best source is plants of all kinds, leafy greens being one of the stars. We're still learning why leafy greens, but they're important. So find the ones that you like. You don't have to eat every one, but find the ones you like and eat more of them. And then, as I mentioned, spices and herbs are the stars. And here's some others are whole grains. They're antioxidant rich is one of the reasons we want whole grains. If you've never tried sorghum or there's so many grains that are ancient that are being explored, like teff from Africa. And there's so many, buckwheat is another one. It's got a naturally sweet taste. It has no wheat in it. So it's a lot of these are gluten-free for people like my daughter and son who have to avoid gluten. Sorghum is naturally sweet and it is full of, it turns out, of these special starches that are probiotics that help our gut. So what's not to like? My granddaughters have really love sorghum as part of it might be part of their lunch or breakfast. And all berries are most potent among the fruits. I mentioned why. It summarizes it. And yet apples increase memory transmitter acetylcholine. My friend Tom Shea right here at the UMass Lowell discovered that. So it's not like, hey, one food has it all. That's why a variety is what we probably need. And then people have done studies, tea, coffee, and chocolate. They're all really great for us. The chocolate is great unless you load it with too much sugar. But that's why I recommend dark chocolate. And then dried beans and lentils, they're prebiotics. They help you maintain a healthy gut. It's not just to help you process your food. It's really a prebiotic. and then nuts and seeds. An ounce a day is what is recommended. And I practice that one. I love nuts. And the reason spices and herbs are the stars, they're potent antioxidants in small volumes. You don't need to eat much, and they have a powerful effect. So if you're worried about, oh, I don't want to eat too much volume of food, this is your real help. This slide gives you some more evidence. The thing that tickles me is the last one, hot chili peppers. Not everybody can eat them, and I find as I get older, I can tolerate less. But the hotter they are, the less the more anti-inflammatory. In other words, they taste like they inflame you, but they actually are anti-inflammatory. They cool down the inflammation we're trying to get rid of. And they reduce all-cause mortality by 25%. It's a really interesting study. So even if you can only tolerate really mild heat, go for it. And peppers without any heat still have many good features. It's just that heat, the capsicum, is a real health food. Many spices and herbs also help boost the immune system, improve blood flow and blood pressure. I need to keep moving on, but I want to mention they also kill or fight microbes, viruses, bacteria, and fungi. Each of them has a special talent. Like cinnamon is put on meat because it kills meat spoiling bacteria. Again, remember, why did we humans go after spices in the first place? It wasn't just that they taste good, but they help preserve food in a time where we had no refrigeration. And people are still exploring whether microbes have something to do with initiating Alzheimer's and other brain issues. So here's a slide that kind of summarizes why sugar's such a big problem. We have increased the amount of consumption. Early 1900s, 5 pounds per year was the US average consumption, 1.5 teaspoons a day. And today, and I wrote that several years ago, it was 47 teaspoons a day. Oh my God. And how much is recommended? 6 teaspoons a day max for women, and 8 to 9 for men, assuming they're larger. Wow. So the average American is eating many times more than they should. No wonder we're in trouble. And the excess sugar actually aggravates your LDL. They can't measure that separately, but it makes your body make this very fine particle LDL cholesterol. When oxidized, it's the part that sticks to your inside of your blood vessels. So we're in trouble. And then it increases. These are all the other things that sugar does bad for our brain. Did you know it actually shrinks the hippocampus when you have too much of it? And it's very pro-inflammatory. Most people don't realize that, but it's pro-inflammatory nature. That's means why it speeds the cognitive decline and rate of Alzheimer's. And we've done tests that show just sugar alone added to a mouse's like water is enough to create memory deficits and increase the amount of A beta in the mice of these little mice, minds of these mice, and also increased their LDL cholesterol. So here's another long list that you probably heard over the years of all the bad things sugar does for us. And tooth decay and gingivitis is an important one of those, because gingivitis can lead to bacteria that might be, some studies are showing it's that kind of bacteria that can trigger Alzheimer's disease in some people. So that's why I'm glad my dentist is attending. Hi, Carol.
Hi there.
And reducing insulin resistance, then it means that we eat less sugar, but we also eat other foods that help us reduce our whatever sugar we eat. It reduces its bad effect on us. So that's when you eat whole grains, the outside of the grain is actually helping deal with the carbs that are inside. And processed meats often have nitrates. That's another reason they could be a problem, but I think it's more the gut problem. And we need to eat foods that regulate blood sugar, such as cinnamon, other spices, green tea, beans and lentils help with that, nuts and seeds. It's what's interesting here, fish and seafood, green vegetables, whole grains, each food that is on the good list, usually you'll see does about 3 to 5 different things that help our brains. And I have to put in some little bit of sweetness. So you can eat up to 1.5 ounces of dark chocolate if it's 70% cocoa powder or more. Life is not totally bleak. This is just a slide showing how we have choices besides white rice, and how much part of why they're so much better for us is the fiber increase. Otherwise, they're about the same, but that increase in fiber, and then with the color in brown and black rice, you have more antioxidants as well. So we're also working to, I'm going to check my time here. Yep, getting close. We need to reduce our LDL cholesterol. The main way is to reduce the amount of sugar intake. And then cholesterol reducing foods are all of these. And look, aren't they familiar? The same ones that helped us either have more antioxidants or reduce our insulin resistance. So again, you'll have all these slides sent to you, not as slides, but as a PDF. I want to make a note that eggs are actually brain food. This one is shown with a little avocado mixed in the yolk, so it makes it even better. But look for omega-3 eggs or free-range eggs because they have more omega-3s in them. All those bugs that the free-range birds are eating actually have omega-3s in them. And studies have shown that when you eat a few of these every week, you're actually helping lower your LDL cholesterol. And then I mentioned earlier that it's really important what kind of fats we eat. It's because our brains the majority of our brain composition is fat. What kind of fat we eat actually matters to how healthy our brains are. And the most important one is omega-3s. And most people in America do not eat enough. We're not eating enough fish. We're not eating enough of certain vegetables. Like, again, green leafy vegetables have the vegetarian form of omega-3s that our bodies convert to the animal form that's in our brains. And this slide lists some of the ways that omega-3s help our brains. And then it's interesting to know the retina of the eye is almost pure DHA. Now, what are the sources? This lists some of them. One of them from the past is cod liver oil. I mentioned lots of green leafy vegetables. It's hard if you're vegan and don't eat fish. Vegetarian and eat fish is actually the way to go for some people. But seaweed and kelp and dulse and kombu, they're all different kinds of seaweed, do have omega-3s. And as I mentioned, many leafy greens and certain nuts and seeds have omega-3s, but they're the plant form, and your body needs to be able to convert them to the animal form, DHA and EPA. Believe it or not, there's even modest amounts in vegetables like cauliflower, and fruits like raspberries. One of the other strategies is to reduce the amount of omega-6s that you eat because they're pro-inflammatory. And eating some of them is essential. but Americans tend to eat too many omega-6s and not enough 3s. And that might be a little Greek to you, but that's basically, if you eat the recommended foods, you're going to be okay. And healthy oils include olive oil, avocado oils, and all the oils and nuts. To cool inflammation, again, it's our familiar group of friends. You're eating less sugar, less refined carbs, less animal foods, and fewer omega-6s, and eat more fish and seafood, omega-3s, plant foods, nuts and seeds, spices and herbs, and again, listing some of the most anti-inflammatory. And then I won't dwell on this. You can ask me questions if you like, but I list here the vitamins we consider most vital to brain health. And I wanted to touch on this, that gut health is key. So we need to keep a healthy gut. You want a lot of healthy bacteria. And there are some foods that have healthy bacteria in them that then helps populate our gut. And this slide lists some of them. Lots of cultures that feature fats also have lots of pickled or fermented vegetables. So you've got sauerkraut and various kinds of cucumber pickles. You have kimchi and lots of assorted pickled vegetables. When I was in Japan, I couldn't believe how many different fermented foods you ate with each traditional meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There were fermented beans, there were fermented, I can't remember them all, but so many different vegetables would be fermented and pickled, and they all tasted great. Then vinegars, especially if they're still alive, like Braggs apple cider, are full of healthy bacteria, but all vinegars from various fruits. But I would limit the use of rice vinegar because of its high sugar content. Sometimes you need it for a particular recipe, but be cautious because of the sugar content. Then there's kombucha and other fermented non-dairy drinks that are popular in some circles. You've got fermented dairy. There's a list of some of them. So many different cultures have fermented dairy to help it last longer as a preservative. And then you've got various soy products such as tempeh and miso. And then, of course, wines and beers have healthy bacteria in them. And then the prebiotics are the food for the good, healthy bacteria. In other words, for your gut to be full of, well populated with healthy bacteria, you got to feed them. Where else are they going to get the food? And so this kind of opened my eyes to how some foods that I thought were healthy, but they didn't come up in some of the other food categories that I was learning about, turn out to be really key prebiotics because they're full of inulin or pectin. So you've got all the orchard fruits a lot of them have pectin in them. You've got onions, garlic, leeks, anything in the onion family has a lot of inulin. And it's a very sweet tasting polysaccharide or insoluble or indigestible fiber. It's naturally sweet tasting. Believe it or not, the biggest source is dandelions, but the bitter flavor, you don't notice the inulin. I happen to love dandelions, but I didn't know they came with inulin. And then you've got other ones that I mentioned, sorghum is so delicious. Again, it's the resistant starch in it that's so sweet. A lot of processing grains destroys a lot of the resistant starches. So another reason to have whole grains. Certain of the prebiotics enhance a good bacteria's ability to produce an anti-inflammatory substance called butyrate that reduces inflammation in the gut. Who knew? This is some of the details that I don't expect anybody to absorb or remember, but it's just, again, it's complicated. Our bodies are complicated. We're walking miracles, and we need to when we learn about how to take good care of ourselves, let's do it. Here's some more prebiotics. So it turns out beans and lentils and other legumes, peas, chickpeas, edamame, they themselves are prebiotics. They have some of that insoluble starch that our healthy bacteria want to eat. And they're delicious in their own right. And then leafy greens, that's another reason. It's not just all the wonderful antioxidant. They have some vitamin E, and as I mentioned, some omega-3s. They also have a lot of prebiotics. I mentioned dandelions already, but each of them has some aspect. Here's the onion garlic family I mentioned. Asparagus has inulin plus other prebiotics. Root vegetables, rich in pectins and other prebiotics. So again, the Nordic diet had thought they're not so great, but on the other hand, the African diet emphasizes them. And here's a good reason to include some root vegetables in your diet. Whole grains, the bran of the grains, and other seeds contain these special prebiotics. I mentioned tree fruits, raw bananas, and here's a whole list of other fruits and nuts. I just think it's fascinating to find all the myriad ways of food that we hopefully like to eat anyway can benefit us in multiple ways. I find it really quite exciting. This is just an extra information that I will let you read later. This is the slide you might want to put on your refrigerator. This kind of summarizes how often you eat these different types of foods. Some will be easy to do, others not so easy. And people ask me where to start. Well, I say start with dessert. Use fruit instead, smaller portions and less often. There's a story you can ask me about in assisted living. They actually started with dessert. They didn't want to hear anything I had to say. That they probably didn't live long that place anyway. Snacks, think about savory, nuts and seeds, carrots and veggies, avocado instead of sweets. Water instead of soda. Beware of bubbly water with sugar added. Like San Pellegrino sounds like a healthy bubbly water, but when it's flavored, they add a lot of sugar, just as much as soda. And the bubbles in some of the water, if it's not mineral water, can also, I think, leach calcium from your bones, but I'm not absolutely sure of that. You consider making your own salad dressings or find ones that don't have any sugar in them or evil ingredients. But you can make your own really easy with extra virgin olive oil, a vinegar of your choice, and sprinkle in some spices. Then eating more vegetables, try to think of what more vegetables you could eat. If you cook leafy greens, you can eat a bigger volume. If you're a salad eater, that's fine. My son-in-law was Italian. He really had trouble eating his cooked greens. He solved that problem. But I still remember our amusing conversations. And I finally got to the topic of how he could flavor them so they would taste better. And he loves balsamic vinegar. He loves mustard. He loves hot sauce. So he can take his pick of any of those. They're all very healthy to put on his cooked greens and eat more of them. Eating berries, nuts and seeds, whole grains. Toxic foods, what you want to do is use less and less often. I think if you try to 100% cut out, it's not like smoking. You don't have to go cold turkey. The main thing is to eat less and less often. And these are some additional menu changes you might consider. The main one I recommend is easiest is using more spices and herbs. It's tough, but really important to reduce the amount and frequency of red meat. And then you might occasionally try a new whole green every week or every month just to find one that you like, because it might be a shock to your system. And there's so many delicious ones out there, and I'm sure you're going to find something. If you do want to add more beans and lentils, I recommend you cook a big batch and then use some for multiple meals. You can also use the canned ones if you rinse off all the salty water. And you can add them to soups, of course. And then, as I already mentioned, selecting nuts as a snack. And then hemp or flax seeds, if you want to have another source of omega-3s, you can sprinkle them on your cereal if you eat cereal or oatmeal. And these are some other ideas. More avocado is a great idea. And the point is, there are just hundreds of delicious foods that can help you protect your brain and enhance brain power. There's so many different nutritional programs out there with great cookbooks. And then there are fewer but very prevalent foods that are actively harm the brain, especially when eaten in excess. Sugar, refined carbs, red meat, trans fats, nitrates. And for many older folks, you have to reduce the amount of salt intake because it aggravates your blood pressure and other issues. And so herbs and spices can help your tongue find new flavors it loves. So the important thing is to increase the use of brain foods as well as decreasing the brain toxins. Summing up, eat real food, mostly plants, and not too much. One of my favorite authors, Michael Pollan. So it's time. This is how you get more information. But again, this will be on the PDF file. And now it's time for Q&A. And I'm going to stop sharing my slides so that Megan can find the questions in the chat.
Thank you
Hi
so
there,
much.
everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Emerson-Lombardo. That was so informative. I do want to remind everybody, we will be sending a recording of this presentation in case you joined late, and I'll be sharing the slides as well, which were very generously shared with us. If you have a question, I'm going to ask you to type it in the chat, and I will read it back to Dr. Emerson-Lombardo. So please feel free.
A shout out to Maggie Culkins, a longtime colleague.
So Dot
and
is
Dottie
asking,
Scott, and I'm seeing so many friends out there.
So I have a question from Dot, and she's asking, are dried herbs as effective as fresh herbs, or is there a difference?
The main thing is that we eat the herbs. I have not heard anyone say that fresh herbs, you must eat fresh herbs because they're so much better. The main thing that I think is in fresh herbs, maybe they're more flavorful, but it's water. And when you dry an herb, you can use more volume. I don't know if that helps, but I have actually not seen research saying that you must eat fresh herbs because that's very hard for people to get, especially like in this climate. I went out this morning to see what could I find out there that was fresh. And basically some thyme I had just transplanted from my daughter's yard in North Carolina and my sage that had lived over the winter. The rest won't be available till later. But you can, I love Penzi spices. And I just ordered a whole bunch new ones. Sunny Spain, like whatever flavors from whatever part of the world, they've got a combination. Turkish, Sunny Spain, Arizona has a little chocolate cocoa powder in it. Rogan Josh, I love all the different Indian spices. And then if you're a Caribbean lover of their, jerk, the thing is that they have very smartly made most of their spice combinations without salt. You can easily add salt if you're okay with that. But so many people are working hard to avoid too much salt. And it's just so easy to have these wonderful spice combinations. Earlier in Trader Joe's, they have their 21 seasoning salute. It used to be $2. I don't know what it is now. But I had several assisted living companies putting that on the table because it was very reasonably priced and helped their seniors not use so much sugar and salt.
That's great.
So
I have a next question from Mag. Sorry, did I interrupt you? Were you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Great, thank you. My next question is from Maggie Calkins, asking your thoughts on intermittent dieting, helpful or harmful?
Well, I have to say, see, I'm not a dietitian, and so I'm not an expert on dieting, like to say achieve certain goals. Like, I don't know whether you're asking about weight loss diets. As far as trying to eat healthier, I think for as long as one can maintain positive changes, that's great. If you stop for some reason, well, I don't think you lose, like every moment that you're eating healthier foods, you're gaining. If you stop eating the healthier foods, well, maybe you stop gaining. Maybe you go backwards. The other thing is people, again, this idea of fasting is taking hold in many circles. I'm no expert on it, but I've read that if weight loss was one's goal, that sometimes fasting will accomplish it, as well as trying to count calories and it's a way of really limiting food intake. And it some people think it really is good for our brains to have fewer hours that we're ingesting food. Again, I'm not an expert on that, but it's a great question. Does anyone else have something to say to Maggie's question? Because we have some nutritionists, I think, in the audience.
Yeah, it looks like Maggie's question was about, she noted overall health and glucose management. So if anybody feels that they can answer that, feel free to unmute yourself and share. I know that I am not an expert in that topic either.
I mean, in general, raise your hand if you got something to say, but I think in general, I would just repeat what I said. Every day that you eat things that are good for you, that help manage your glucose or overall health, is a day that you're gaining. And so intermittent is better than not doing it at all. I mean, that's just a kind of a logical. I don't think it hurts your body to worse, to stop occasionally than not doing it at all. Now, somebody else might have something to add. No,
Thank you. Let's see. I see something in the chat. Let's see. So somebody says from an iPad that intermittent fasting allows the microbiome to finish digesting all the food you've been digesting, and it allows the microglia in the brain to clean up the waste products you make during the day. Okay. Thank you for sharing. I myself have a lot more to learn about that topic.
Right, and then that's why they say sleep, deep sleep is so important. I hadn't known that fasting did that, but the cleaning up of the brain, that's why getting one's sleep and having deep sleep is so important. You don't need it every day, I mean every night, but our natural processes are amazing, that our brains could actually be, one researcher described it as kind of like washing our brain cells. They shrink, and then there's all these fluids and toxins like the A beta get washed away. So thank you for that contribution.
Yeah, I look forward to learning more about that. Our next question is from Julie, and she asks, if one is on a low sodium diet, it is a challenge to incorporate fermented foods, which are typically high in sodium. Any suggestions on this?
Well, you've got your dairy products that are not high in salt. She's right about a lot of fermented foods, like even pickles. How do you get them pickled? You just add salt and then they ferment. Olives is one of my favorite fermented foods, but they're very high in salt. So I only can think of dairy and like kombucha.
That's when my martinis are okay. I have the olives in them that are very high in salt, but they're fermented.
You've just balanced everything there, Marlena.
Does somebody else have something to add to this question about how best to get more fermented foods in your life when you're low sodium?
Dairy is the main one I've heard, as you said, in kombucha. I did see somebody said, Dorothy said she makes her own pickles and uses less sodium when she makes them and takes just a few slices before she eats. Interesting. Thank you. All
Yeah,
right.
hi Dottie, she's my friend and she
Oh.
does make the best pickles. I
That's
didn't
great.
realize they were
Yeah,
lower
hi.
sodium. That's cool. Hi.
Yeah,
I have a question from Joanne saying that stevia was mentioned in one of the last slides. Joanne's asking if there's any problem with drinking stevia sweetened drinks.
None that I know of. I don't know if anyone else has heard something, but what I try to do with stevia is some of the products out there use stevia is very, very sweet. And so if you're putting it in a product that isn't pure stevia extract, like a little packet to put in a coffee or something, they will extend it with something. And some companies actually put in dextrose because most people don't know it's sugar. So in that little packet, it's mostly sugar with a little stevia. And I like products that use inulin as the extender. Now, isn't that perfect? Because you're getting a prebiotic in with your stevia. There's not all of their products do this, but Sweet Leaf. And they called it that when stevia was still outlawed. To give, no, you couldn't, it wasn't outlawed. You couldn't advertise it as a sweetener. Again, the sugar industry did everything to keep stevia off the shelves in the grocery store. But if you look for Sweet Leaf, some of their products use inulin because stevia is so sweet, you would need like a tiny pinch and it would be hard to regulate. But you add your extender like inulin and you've got something really, it's even more delicious, I think.
Thank you. All right, I'm looking through. I have some comments here. So one woman said she was surprised to see no coffee on the Nordic diet, as coffee is an integral part of culture in all Nordic countries. Something I also don't know a lot about.
It probably is there, and the information I got maybe didn't list it, but I would think it's part of the, I mean, I'm not as familiar with the Nordic diet as I am the Mediterranean, but I would say it's probably an omission.
Okay. A couple comments. Somebody suggests that we look at Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen app. Sounds helpful. Another person is letting us know that lemon balm and holy basil do have interactions with some prescription medications and to be careful. And then Eileen says this is the first time she understood the concept of prebiotics and is asking if you could expand on that a little bit. And Eileen, if there's anything in particular, I'll go to the bottom of the chat if you want to put it in there.
I guess there was another slide I skipped over there at the end, but it's basically that, from what I understand, there are certain fibers, like we've all heard, you got to eat lots of fibers. Well, some of the fibers were to help our digestive system, but it turns out many of the fibers that are healthy for us to eat are resistant starches that go through our system. We do not extract nutrition from them, but they get to the part of the gut where the healthy bacteria are and they consume it. It's their food. And it's a really interesting concept that we're part of a big zoo here. And I guess they're little animals and mites that live in our skin. We don't think of ourselves as hosts to many other organisms, but we are, and they help determine our overall health. So yeah, it behooves all of us to really try to stretch our minds and understand. So prebiotic, as I understand it, is simply the food that helps our healthy bacteria live and thrive, and helps the population of the healthy ones. And maybe, I don't know exactly how we diminish the population of the unhealthy ones. The only food I heard that really increases their volume is red meat, but others here may know more about this growing area. And when I last tried to find some more information on the prebiotics, again, most of the literature was on dairy, fermented dairy, because we know more about that. And I'm sure besides kombucha and dairy, there by now has to be some other healthy fermented products that aren't so salty. I'm trying to think of, in Japan, their diet has quite a lot of salt. I'm trying to remember those really strange looking fermented beans, whether they were, I don't think they're as salty as some products. But that's a challenge.
Yeah.
I just saw a chat from my longtime friend Fred Rhodes. We went to grade school together.
Oh,
In
wow.
high school. Yeah, he's out in he's a mycologist and gives fantastic talks on fungus in the forest,
Oh, how
different,
interesting.
yeah, wonderful talk speaker.
It
So
is.
I'll let you say, what are the other questions, Megan?
Well, it is 2:30 and I am mindful of your time.
Oh.
So.
I'm okay. I think others probably need to drop off, but I see there's a whole bunch of questions there, and I don't mind trying to answer more of them if you want to go for, if
Sure.
you've got time, Megan, to go another, say, 15 minutes.
Sure, I do. So I'll just say, Eileen just had one quick question about the prebiotics. She was asking what was in lentils. Was that inulin in lentils or no? That's the sweet thing.
I think it's other things, but
Yeah.
I'll try
Okay.
to look into that exactly. I think it's a whole variety of things in lentils and beans. The inulin is that sweet tasting
Right.
product.
Chicory and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Andre says that turmeric should be accompanied by fat for best absorption. He's
Yes.
asking if he could achieve that by taking a curcumin capsule along with an omega-3 capsule.
That sounds very innovative to me. I
Yeah.
cannot say, I mean, it sounds like, yeah, something I actually had this morning.
Yeah.
What I don't know is it enough? Or is it better? I have heard we absorb it better as part of cooked food, but that sounds as innovative a way as any.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty clever too.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I'll try to look into it to see if it actually works, but I mean, it makes sense that might work.
Yeah. Melinda is asking if you have any thoughts on monk fruit and notes that Lancanto, I may be mispronouncing that, I apologize, is the brand she uses. Any thoughts on monk fruit?
Well, I haven't researched as much as stevia, but I understand it's an equally safe, sweet tasting sugar substitute. So I personally don't know of any reason not to use it. Some people don't like the flavor of some stevia, and so they like monk fruit. So I don't know any reason why not to try that.
I found it more palatable. So if people have shied away from stevia, I started using it a few years ago, but now I can't remember what I read, unfortunately, to the benefits of it, so versus.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any negatives, so go for it.
Great. Somebody wrote from an iPad to check out Dr. Will. I'm going to get this wrong. Bolshiewicz. He is it is spelled in the chat. He is a gastroenterologist who has become a guru on the gut microbiome. He has a book called Fiber Fueled, and it describes all about the prebiotic, probiotic, and a newer term, postbiotics, and everything gut health. Eileen, it sounds like that would have a lot of information on the topic you're curious about. So thank you for sharing. iPad.
Yeah, I was just taking the note on it. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that got through most of our questions, unless anybody has one. I'm scrolling through to make sure I did not miss anybody. Anything else anybody has? Any other questions? Melinda says she makes a tea with turmeric, ginger, pepper, lemon juice, and about half a teaspoon of coconut oil.
Yummy. Yeah, coconut oil, again, in modest amounts. I think it's 2 tablespoons a day. What amount did you say you used?
She said half a teaspoon.
A half a
Sorry, Melinda.
teaspoon. I heard the limit is like 2 tablespoons, but that's another healthy oil. And combining it with turmeric, why not? I think it's fun to experiment and think creatively, like we're hearing from the audience.
Definitely. Eileen is asking if there are current research studies one might join. So I'll
That
definitely
you
direct that
go
to
to
you.
Trial Match. If you're interested in ones that are looking at brain health, the government and the Alzheimer's Association have teamed up, and it's something, I think it's called Trial Match. But when you have a clinical trial, you have to register it and make it searchable so that people like yourself can find it. And there are all sorts of studies out there. They need people. Some are clinical trials, some are working with caregivers, some are working with patients or people with mild cognitive impairment, some with normal elderly, just trying to contribute to research, or maybe it's an intervention that might help. So there's all sorts of studies out there. So thank you for asking that question. If you need to email me if you didn't catch any of this, Trial Match is the main source that I know about. But you could email me. I guess I could show that slide again, but basically it's N Emerson, like the first part of my name, you can either do bu.edu, that's the shortest one, or brainwellness.com. And if you email me, I'll do my best to respond. And my phone number was on the last slide. Again, you're going to get a PDF version of all my slides. The very last one, or near the last, I actually added some extra slides for the PDF. You'll see my phone number and you can text me.
Yeah, thank you. I just sent those slides right now. I had that slide up and ready to go.
Okay. Any other questions out there? They've all been wonderful.
Yeah, this has been a great group. We had about 40 people, which is very exciting. And I look forward to sharing the presentation as well.
I love this. I'm looking at, again, the tea with turmeric, ginger, pepper, lemon juice, and half a teaspoon of coconut oil. I think that sounds delicious. I make ginger tea for myself all the time, but I like these other flavors. And it reminds me of one, I'm not really advertising for Penzies. I'm just enthusiastic about some of their spice combinations. This one is called Mural of Flavor, and it's simple. It has shallots, onion, garlic, lemon peel, citric acid, chives, and orange peel. And it's so flavorful, again, without the salt. And I just thought, well, there's, and then when it gets to be spring, well, you can buy dried spices of any of these kinds, but when it gets to be spring, it's going to be wonderful to go out and gather. I'm used to being able to get fresh basil or, well, the thyme and sage comes back really quick. Rosemary, I have to plant fresh every year because of being here. Though in this winter was so mild, I bet my rosemary bush might have lived over. So this has been a really great audience, and I love the questions. And I hope again, if you got more questions, send me an email and I'll do my best to answer. And I love the contributions that different people made. Like the suggestion of taking I will have to check that one out, turmeric with your omega-3 pill, because that's what I actually do myself, but I didn't think of it as helping me absorb the turmeric. My daughter sprinkles turmeric on every time she has a fried egg, which I do as well, which is a nice idea. So I think we're done. People are quiet.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody,
Yeah.
so much. I will be sending, this presentation has been recorded, and I will be sending the presentation out. We have a little bit of tweaking of it to do to make it downloadable. So I will be sending that email out, but Thank you again, and I hope you join us on March 21st, when Tara Hammes will be from the Massachusetts Council on Aging, will be presenting on navigating the nutrition landscape for older adults. There is a link to register for that as well in the email that I sent you with Dr. Emerson-Lombardo slides. So thank you so much.
It was fun seeing all of you, and thank you for attending. Have a
Have a
good
great day.
week.